Right. All right, so we're here at the second team meeting for the Nixpkgs architecture team. Oh, hello. Let's quickly go over the protocol here. I'm recording today again. I'm also taking meeting notes. You can see these in the meeting agenda, and I'll later upload them to the repository here. Yeah, and I'll also lead the meeting today. So, right, let's quickly go over some administration from last time. We couldn't quite make it all the way. Well, for one, regarding the team organization, but also we have 2 new official members now. One of them is here, Robert. I worked with him a bunch on Nexus module things and other bits and bobs. So glad to have him here. The other new member is Tom from Flux. We might have to find a better time for Tom at some point, but I think he's very busy most of the time. So as long as he's responsive in Matrix channel, I guess it's fine. But yeah, glad to have some more team members and hopefully getting more in the future. So actually pinged Robert on Matrix. That's how I think he found his way here. I might reach out to more people that I think would be worthwhile to have on the team that might be busy otherwise. Yeah, and so the last time we discussed a bunch of the kind of document here. I think let's go through like just the end of it to address this real quick. So last time we went over here, over all these parts. I think we touched maybe on this, but this is a very structural, very technical thing. There shouldn't be too much to argue here. I listed out the requirements here for joining the team. This is kind of probably the most controversial and weird bit in here that I kind of made people having the reason being a requirement. I think it's a good requirement, hard to evaluate. I left it in here for now. I think it's fine. If there's any concerns, let me know. Otherwise, this is recommendations being available for video meetings, having a GitHub account just makes it much more convenient. So this is kind of Tom is unfortunately unavailable during this time, so might have to do something about that. Right, and then this is the procedure I laid out, and Tom and Robert followed that nicely, and I was able to add them to the team list. I also added a team log entry where all the team additions and removals are recorded. Not strictly necessary, but nice to have, I think. And so there are some. This is something I have to do right now, since I have the kind of admin rights for the GitHub account and the right, because I created everything. I don't want these rights for myself all the time. I think after some time I can invite some other people to this to being an admin. But yeah, then procedure for leaving the team. This is a bit tricky. So the requirements are necessary. Right here I go into why they're necessary, and so if all these requirements from above are necessary, and so if a requirement isn't being met anymore, the member should leave the team. That could easily happen if they aren't available through Matrix anymore. Makes sense to leave the team if you can't discuss it anymore. But yeah, and sometimes I guess there could be cases where someone doesn't want to leave the team, and then I pretty much just wrote here that we need to discuss it. Someone needs to have the initiative to talk to people to maybe talk to the person itself that they think should leave the team, and then hopefully convince them that it might be a good idea. And otherwise, they can reach out to me, and I could make the final decision on that. I hope to never need that. I think we're all fairly reasonable people in the Nix community, but someone, Rock, mentioned that it would be a good idea to lay this out properly, so that in case there is something, a problem like this, we have a procedure for doing that. Is there any disagreement or any suggestions here? Otherwise, we'll continue.
None.
All right. Sounds good. And then removing someone from the team is essentially just undoing the addition of them. There, right, means removing from the GitHub organization, removing from the team list, and adding a team log entry. Yeah, and then so next the code. Where do we put code? So right, this is we're trying to improve Nixpkgs. So in general, let's put it in Nixpkgs. We can make PRs, we can make issues there. But we also have the ability to put it in the Nixpkgs architecture, GitHub organization, and use this to maybe structure some code that the team wants to share. Then communication. So I made some additions here in a PR. In this version, at least, it's Matrix and Jitsi. I've had feedback last time and in the channel that Discourse and GitHub, or at least Discourse, would be a good idea. But I think GitHub issues are also good for technical documentation. I'll quickly go over the PR in a bit. And then meetings, just description of the meeting, where you can see it, the time, and so on. I try to encourage people to ask for an invite to the meetings. That way they can track it in their calendars and get emails on updates. There is someone wrote a website to automate this step where people can invite themselves. That's really neat. I should maybe look into doing that, though I'm not sure if I have access to. Right, I'd have to give right access to the Nix's calendar to this tool, and it's not open source. And I've just kind of given access to this calendar by Ilgo for this, so not sure. Anyway, so live streaming, uploading to the Nix's YouTube channel, that doesn't happen yet because I don't have access to that yet. I'm asking for it. Might need some time still, but the idea is to upload these to YouTube. Right, meeting notes are taken here and later uploaded to the meetings repository. Does it sound all good? I went over it real quick, but I think it's not very, not that worth of a discussion, mainly just procedures here and there. All right, then I'll quickly also take a look at the GitHub PR I made here. Some adjustments from discussions we've had. And so one of the things I did since last time is I created a GitHub board, a project board for tracking the kind of issues this team tries to address. I'm going to link this. Well, I linked it in the Matrix channel already, but I'll just link it in Jitsi as well. And so here I created 4 columns for these issues. Anybody can create new issues here. So this is beta issues. I'm not sure how much different they are, but anyways, this is what I use here. There's this little expansion thing up here where I put a link to the repository where you can add issues. And anybody can open an issue in that repository, and it will automatically get added to the to consider section here. And then in the team, we can go over these issues, decide whether it's in scope for the team, whether it's out of scope, once it's in scope, we can we're gonna look into it. We might work on it. And once we actually completed an issue, so this column here is currently empty, but I hope that we can at some point have all the issues in here, or at least even just a single issue, because these are all really big things, to essentially have some here, eventually have some here. So I encourage everybody to add entries themselves here. I'm probably also going to go add some more from the last discussion we've had. Also, there's some more in the main README. Yeah, and so I created this. Here I point out that people can open a new issue. It will automatically be added. Then what I changed here, right, project board. Yes. And so last time it was mentioned that I previously wrote reaching consensus. This might not be possible if we have a large team. And Ash made a good suggestion to an article which kind of goes into trying to reach consensus, but if that doesn't work, like really trying, the main way of doing something, of reaching a decision, should be consensus. But if that doesn't work, we can use voting as a last resort. Or the article suggested anything else, but voting, right? Voting is kind of the thing they suggested. Yeah, and so I just kind of point this out here. If it really doesn't work, use voting, and someone has to decide when it is time to vote. And so we don't have any discussions for who that needs to be. It's going to be me for now. Right now there is a couple of references to specifically me in here. Again, over time, I'd like to delegate this to some other people. I don't want to be the single individual having control over many things. Yeah, and so maybe I can just ask for a bit of feedback here. What do you think of this approach? Do you see any issue, or do you think it's good like this? All right, if there's no feedback, sounds pretty good. Right, and then some minor changes here regarding consensus. I added this entry that people should mention their email address so they can, so the team members can get an invite. Yeah, and then here communication, I added Discourse and GitHub. I think very good suggestions. Discourse has a lot of the Nixos community, and it's more persistent than Matrix Chat. And GitHub for more technical discussions. That sounds like a good idea. Right, and let's try to, so we can link to the Matrix discussions we were having, but let's also try to use GitHub and Discourse accordingly, so there's a more persistent record of the discussions. I think for me that's pretty hard, but I'm going to try my best. Yeah, and so maybe Robert, do you think these changes are good? You can also review them later if you want to. I also added Tom as a reviewer.
Yeah, they look good to me. I had to look before, and changes look good.
Sounds good. All right, so now that out of the way that I did, I think at this point we can really go into the more technical aspects and really look at issues and go over these. So maybe to start, just kind of looking at the ones I added here. Maybe we can look at the STDNF.make derivation first. Robert also made a good comment here, adding some more context. And so I think, well, this is just about kind of recreating STDNF.make derivation without any legacy craft associated with it. I think that's very, very much needed. It probably won't be called STDNF.make derivation anymore. especially since stdinv is kind of bound to a specific C compiler already. But yeah, there's things like based on C and make files, attributes are stringified, then that goes into structured attributes, which has a PR, which kind of makes it the default, I think. Yeah, Yuri?
I wonder if we should rename stdinf to cstdinf or something like that to in ubuild, let's say, to make it clear that if you are not built in C-based package, then maybe you could need this stdinf.
Yeah, it is very much C-based. Well, C and
C++
glibc.
and friends.
Yeah. Sounds like.
Well, sometimes it's not glibc, like on macOS, it's not glibc. So
yeah, right. So glibc stdinf is really the kind of the C library for like syscalls and stuff like that, and the basic library for interacting with the system. Although, right, C compiler is kind of goes towards bootstrapping a bit. Might be reasonable to call it stdinf because of that. But yeah, that's a good suggestion. But yeah, so I think that's definitely in scope for the team. I don't think there's a discussion about that. And so, right, renaming stdinf. I personally think there should be something not specific to an stdinf here. We should have a yes.
Do we actually need the whole SDN part, like the namespace? Like basically all other builders are just like packages dot something. So technically we could name it like, I don't know, like packages dot builder dot make or mason or something else.
So like namespace it under builders.
Either builders or no namespace at all, and make the whole function name more elaborate. So like instead of make derivation, it would be like mason or make, depending on an actual build tool being executed.
Yeah, a more descriptive name. Right, I think for legacy concerns, we are mainly concerned about right restructuring everything, and as part of this, we can also right rename. Well, mainly I think introducing something new, like a very generic builder, like build derivation. Although almost every term in Nixpkgs at this point is overloaded. Build derivation. I can't remember build derivation actually. Yeah, but I think maybe the name isn't that important for the start. I think after we have a good interface, we can still bike shed a lot over the name. Probably most important is the actual implementation.
Yeah,
how it should be.
and about that, so like there was a mention of rewriting it or like large structural changes to make derivation stuff, right? Who's actually capable of doing this aside John Erickson? Like, I still can't quite grasp the whole cross-compiling stuff. Well, I was building like custom builders and stuff. It technically can compile C, but no cross-compilation, no nothing. And at that point, if we are changing stuff, do we actually want to use Bash?
Yeah. Right. That I guess that could be its entire separate issue to kind of revise the bashness of Nixpkgs. I don't think it's great that bash is used so much. It's really.
I believe there was a mention in thesis about it that it should be replaced.
Oh yeah, I think oil shell was suggested.
No, I meant the actual like Elko's thesis. And yeah, there is an issue for. RFC for all shell, but yeah, I think Ruby is a good idea since it's easy to bootstrap and it's absolute powerhouse. But like that's way too technical, I guess, for this conversation.
Yeah, I think Ruby. I'm not sure. I feel like Ruby. Many people dislike Ruby, and it wouldn't catch on because of that. I feel like it would have to be something like Shell, but kind of something like Bash, but not as badly designed.
So beauty of Ruby is that it does a lot of meta programming, and one of the things that you can do with Ruby is execute basically any command by just using ticks. So it's quite shell-like.
Using
Like
using commands.
Like ticks. I don't know how to call it. Like quotation ticks. Like
It means
Like
backtick
this.
segments in the shell. When you,
backticks.
when you spawn a subshell, you can use the segment in.
Yeah, so it's right. So it's kind of shell-like in that way.
Yes, so it's quite clean. Also, it has like out-of-the-box copy sim-linking functions that like look like shell scripting.
Yeah. Yuri makes a good suggestion here in the comments too. Do you want to talk about this a bit?
To expand a bit, the was and wasy approach is like in my head for the in general using it for the small derivations like write text or write application, write shell application and stuff, so that we could run it without dependency on specific system, right? But we could also strive towards using it for, in general, generating the builders from essential Nix code. Like the first, let's say, obvious thing for me is in all places where we use shell to do some copies, simulants and stuff, we could just define them in Nix and convert it to a sequence of WASM operations. We could also expand it to a sequence of, in general, some shell-like operations, but defined using Nix's weak part type system.
So, like, I haven't actually read the whole issue on WASM. It seems like a good idea, but like, I have one question. Like, you still need something to convert WASM to. Let's say we use like, I don't know, Rust or something, and we still need to convert it to WASM, which is system dependent, unless we actually commit WASM to the repository.
No.
Right, you can't
generate WASM script. Well, there is WASM text format. We can generate it from Nix, essentially, from like a set of from some structure.
Yeah, but then it's like, do we really want to write derivation builders in Nix? Nix is great for declarative specifying things, but that would go into like using Nix as a runtime, kind of a runtime declaration.
Did you, just to clarify, did you just mean like directly using Nix to generate WASM without any intermediate layers, like other language like Rust, like assembly scripts?
I think that's what he means, yes.
That sounds quite hardcore.
No, well, there is, as I said, there is WASM text format, and if we provide a rich enough base library in WASM for it, then it will be quite straightforward actually to, like, it essentially will be just like one short expression for each line of, like, call this process command or something, or create this symlink, and it will be just, we will just need to convert like the Nix representation into a sequence of comments, and we will not have to deal with all the intricacies of like actually like doing some computations in the WASI or some in WASM or something like
I
that.
think it might work, but I think it goes a bit far with like using WASM for the declaration. I think it's good as an intermediate layer for like the actual builders, what they might use in the end, like in 10
We
years
could also have
or something.
We could also have a translator written, compiled into WASM that would translate Nix definition into WASM code.
Yeah, but yeah, let's go a bit back here. So we talked a bit about replacing bash. I think that's a bit of a separate issue if you want to talk about the stdnf.make derivation. I think mainly let's maybe talk a bit about the kind of base of make derivation, like what is it based on, or how we want to build that up. I'd like to write some prototypes for this, or Robert might also be interested. But so make derivation is fundamentally based on the derivation primop, which is kind of bad in that it does something like arguments, and then it does some derivation computation here, derivation blah blah blah, but then it adds all the arguments of the derivation itself. I think that in itself is already kind of a bad thing to start from. And so I think one of the things we can do is to use the derivation strict primitive, which is essentially just arguments, and then it gives you the outputs instantiated. So it gives you something like this. And I think that would be a very good base for make derivation and all derivations based on it. So we just don't have to expose all of these arguments. And Robert also went into this bit in a prototype where the user, because this is the interface of the derivation in the end. This becomes part of the public API of it, which users might not want. Yeah, and so does anybody have any ideas regarding that, suggestions or concerns? I guess also, I always keep thinking about typing, because if we go this basic in a level, if you go this basic, it might make sense to add types from the start. But that is then another beast and might be better as a separate issue.
I think.
But yeah, like
making this change of removing the arguments from the output already probably makes it easier to put in types after the fact. That's speculative, but there's a good chance that it actually improves things.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Git is.
Yeah.
You had thumbs down was for bash being fine.
Yeah.
I see. Yeah. By the way, we don't have the chat for future reference as far as I know. So it might be good to keep discussions to minimum there, or if they're relevant, to also put them somewhere else. You can also write in the shared document here if you want to. It's linked in the meeting description, or I can also share the link here if you want. Let me do that. But that's not. Here, if you want to mention something. Yeah. So
the shared doc isn't writable by at least me.
Oh, I should change that then.
I think you need to log in there.
I can't
Oh.
register, and I don't think I have an account.
It is editable. You just need to click like edit button at the top. Like there are like 3 modes.
Oh,
No,
yeah.
if I try to type, it asks me to sign in, and the register button is disabled.
Oh, never mind. Yeah, the same.
Interesting. I thought I saw something about menu. I don't have anything here where I can configure the permissions. Oh, editable here. Oh, okay. Here you go. Freely editable by anyone. Should work now.
With regard to the choice of language, I would be concerned about portability and restricting the platforms that Nix can run on.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, Nix doesn't work super well on a lot of platforms, but we shouldn't restrict this with our language choice.
There's also the need for bootstrapping. If we cannot use the new make derivation for bootstrapping purposes, we're going to have to maintain 2 of them.
Yeah. And right, that then also goes into stdnv a bit, which is needed for bootstrapping. And I think there's probably bash in stdnv.
If you wrote up those requirements, let's add like structured data or something. That would be a big one.
What I didn't get that structured.
Like passing JSON, like structured data.
Oh, yes. Right. This writing, and I guess that would, like, if there is a good interface between Nix and this language, it might make some things possible, not possible.
Yeah, that's what I was
right now.
gonna say. I was gonna expand structured data. Like we should be able to pass structured data from Nix to this language easily. Like bash types aren't really flexible enough to represent a basic Nix type.
Okay. So like I was looking into all these languages quite a bit, I don't know, several months ago. Like one of the ideas I had in mind is custom TypeScript runtime. Like there are several custom ones already written, but I haven't really noticed any single one of them that is easy to bootstrap. And it's honestly like perfect scripting language. Like it has types, everyone understands it. It's super solid.
Which one is that?
TypeScript, but we need
TypeScript.
but we need a proper runtime for it. It would be something custom.
Interesting.
I'm
not sure.
I think we should probably keep the scope of this issue somewhat limited. The original goal was to improve make derivation itself and not necessarily change much about the standard env.
Yeah, it could be a separate issue to be discussed, and I guess there could also be dependencies between these issues. And it might be that these 2 issues are kind of interlocked between each other. That creating new base builder kind of would be nice with an entirely new language for builders. I guess we can experiment with some things there because Nix doesn't lock us into any specific language there.
Just to clarify, I noted that I have not yet found a runtime that would be easy to bootstrap for TypeScript, so not bootstrapable. That's a downside.
Okay. Yes. Um, yes, there's a comment there. ZX.
Yeah, not really noteworthy. Just
I see.
it's a nice
Oh, yeah.
DSL for executing like shell.
We right. So I guess we want to maybe look into other languages that might be worthwhile, and right, we should use something that is popular. We can't use a very unknown thing, or we don't want to run into weird edge cases for some random tool. It needs to be really solid, I think.
So, like, if you want a list of languages, I could already name a few of them, that other options that I considered. First one is Lua. It's like super easy to bootstrap, and it's a fine language, super lacks the whole batteries and stuff. And another one would be Genet. It's a Lispy language, so I got a feeling it would be well accepted in the community.
It's a what-based language?
It's Lispy. Like it's
Oh,
a,
Lisp.
yeah, it's a custom dialect of Lisp.
I am not sure how much Lisp is appreciated by the Nix community.
Yeah,
So yeah.
and
Yeah, Lua sounds like a great suggestion. Actually, I've seen some other projects and packages adopting Lua as their scripting mechanism, and it's a very popular language already, I think.
Lua
Yeah.
is also very good because of the metaprogramming thing mentioned earlier. I do want to say that Ruby is really portable and runs on basically anything, and it's bootstrappable.
So
Lua more so.
for Lua, I could not find like a proper like shell executing DSL that, yeah, basically you can't nicely execute shell from Lua. There are some like Luash or something library, which is like the best you can do, but it's still kind of ugly.
I guess I guess it also may be so. What are we really deciding on here? Because are we deciding on the default language to be used in all of Nix packages for package builders, or could it be that we have multiple languages being supported decently well? Although that would then be also a problem with like conventions maybe and having to implement. Yeah, well, there's like SCDN things like make wrapper, things like that, which are currently implemented in Bash. These would, if we have multiple languages, they need to be implemented multiple times.
I think for Nix packages itself, we probably want to be opinionated here, just for consistency and less lack support. But I think if possible, we should make sure our low-level tools are flexible enough. But that might already be implied by Nix.
I think we should really pay attention to the composability here. Ideally, we want all the language infrastructures and such to be able to work together. Right now, the situation is that we have at the top level of make derivation, so to speak, the standard endpoint, and then we create a hierarchy of other make derivation functions that have specific adaptations for languages, right? But this is a single inheritance hierarchy, in effect, and that's an issue because some packages they contain source code in multiple languages, and that's not really a use case that we can support really well right now because of this hierarchy. So that's one composability issue, and I think if we start to support multiple languages for writing these build scripts, that's going to be even worse. The composability will be unsolvable at that point.
Yeah. Composability hard. Yeah. But I guess we do agree that Bash. Well, I mean, that is really the question: is Bash I guess it is pretty bad, but is it bad enough that we need to change? Personally, I think yes. I mean, it might be hard to pull off, but once we have switched to something better, I think that will be like so many people will be much happier about this in the future. But yes, not sure.
I'm of the opinion that bash creates a lot of problems and would be very valuable to get rid of. I think any language with a few little helper functions is going to be more productive and more reliable than bash.
Lua also has like POSIX libraries, so that you don't have to do things like in the shell. You don't have to shell out as much.
Nice. Yeah, I remember that with bash, there have been problems with the stdinf being too slow, and some optimizations have been done where less process calls are done.
Could you elaborate on the slowness part? What was so slow about it?
I think it was
I
just loading too many processes, something like that.
Well,
By the way,
sure.
what at some point in our discussion we discussed oil shell. Is it because of bootstrapping or something else?
So there is an RFC for oil shell, but
Yes.
I don't think it fixes our issues. If anything, it adds another quote-unquote dependency, which we probably will not be able to run on all platforms. Like, don't quote me on that, but yeah, I don't see it as being good enough.
Sorry, this might be a little ignorant of me, or maybe I'm just a little dense, but if we're going to be shelling out anyway, what's the point of replacing the shell?
Well, I guess we are. I think shelling out might only be meant as in like calling other processes, not necessarily shells.
Yeah, exactly. We're not going to be shelling out. We're going to be forking processes, and being able to do that reliably and manipulate the output and data structures, actually parse things. Like, there's a huge amount of benefits here that are easier to do with other languages. Like, as long as the language doesn't make execing processes too hard, I think it's going to be a win. And making a few helper functions there is pretty easy to do.
So now in Ruby, for example, the backticks idiom specifically spawns a shell. It doesn't spawn a process, it spawns a shell.
Yeah, I would like to avoid the shell because I find it adds so many bugs. And we can have helper functions that don't require a shell. Like, all these languages have concepts of arguments and arrays. Like, we don't need the shell to reparse all of our commands and require us to escape and all this bugs.
Yeah. I mean, right. Shell, just the escaping issues are pretty bad. Right. I quickly want to mention the. I wanted to mention this earlier, but having a nice interface between Nix and the language would be really beneficial. Like, imagine we could, pure Nix, for example, which transpiles Nix into pure script. And imagine the same for the builders, where we could kind of write functions in Nix, import them into the build script, and execute them there as well. Not sure how much that's needed, but it would be like another layer, like another level of interaction and integration between Nix and the builder script, which would be really cool.
You'd also have to bootstrap PureScript without using this new Maker edition.
To bootstrap what?
To bootstrap PureScript.
Oh yeah. Well, PureScript is only like as an example of Nix being compiled to another language. But yeah, like even like it would work with Lua as well. It's like just transpile Nix into Lua, for example.
Hmm.
I'm not sure how useful
Then we
that is.
could transpile it into WASM, for example, as well.
Yeah, I
Through,
don't know. I
just
don't
line.
know about the using Nix for imperative stuff, because that's basically what we're doing, right? We're doing imperative stuff in the sandbox.
Right.
I have actually written a little wrapper at one point that took Nix expression and coupled it with like a poor man's runtime. And one of the biggest issues I found was that without a type system, it's really hard to keep track of which function produces what kind of thing, whether it's curried or not. But right now we only have to worry about currying. But when you have such added functionality like an IO type or something, that adds an whole other dimension of having to keep track of whether a function is pure or not. And it was really awful. It was fun, but it was awful.
Yeah, I remember doing something like this as well. I called it Nix RTS, which is also like a runtime for Nix. And I wrote like an example program here, which does like a IO loop, and I also had to do something with purity. Add like a where is it? I had to add like a world argument to all the the functions which do IO operations. Kind of like Haskell does it internally. But yeah, interesting stuff.
Yeah, so I think we had the same idea on the sort of user interface side. My implementation was sort of event sourcing because there was no built-in exec at the time, I think. But yeah, you've probably noticed as well. It's hard to keep track of which ones are IO and
yeah. Tom, yes, it is mostly like a state monad over the entire world. Yes. Yeah, but so I think the best suggestion here I heard is Lua, but maybe that would be one of the first things we could. So like there isn't an issue for this language stuff in here yet, but I think I'm gonna add one here, and then this could be this could be one of the things that the Nixpkgs architecture team could decide on. And I think it would be a good thing to decide on. To keep Bash, switch to maybe Lua or Ruby. Kevin says, Lua isn't his favorite language, but given the constraints, it might be the best option. And it is years better than Bash, yes. Gittis says Ruby is better than Lua. Yes, it's definitely worth discussion.
It just seems to be more convenient for the job. That's just me.
Yeah, I think it also goes back to who's more experienced in each language. I don't have or Lua experience personally.
So I have experience with both, and just to be clear, you can have straight up Ruby without any dependencies, like glibc or something is like the only ones which we already have. And also there is this thing called mruby, which is like meant for embedded stuff, which is super minimal, basically Lua at that point.
The big thing for portability, I think, would be to not depend on a specific runtime implementation.
mruby I said, but yeah.
Yeah. I think let's definitely consider. So I think this is a good point where we can really test out the kind of idea of this team, where we look at a problem, we list out all the potential solutions. So this would be in this case, stay with Bash, Ruby, Lua, and we really list out all the arguments for and against each choice and try to find the best one there. We could also poll the community for this. So if I guess it's a good point, like if the community dislikes Ruby, we can't pick Ruby. If the community dislikes Lua, which might also be the case, we probably can't pick that. But yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Another point that we need to keep in the head that if we pick some, let's say, exotic language, and we will need to provide a runtime for it that fits our needs, right? So just running raw Ruby isn't that great, as we discussed. I think that was the point, because like you can do basically anything in Ruby, even drop into essentially Bash, or like write a poem or something. So the same with Lua. If Lua is great for embedded stuff, but you still need to provide some standard library that will provide you necessary basic I/O functions.
Yeah, so just to check if I got that. So Ruby Lua by default isn't great. We need they need libraries.
Ruby does not really need libraries. Like, it has not just batteries, but whole power plant out of the box. Where Lua is super minimal.
Okay. And Ruby a bit less. Ruby needs more libraries too. It doesn't have a lot of functionality.
Okay.
Or did
Lua is super minimal. It basically has nothing out of the box, like absolutely nothing. And Ruby has everything you could ever wish for. Yeah. And
I see.
could you replace that line with Lua? It's really bugging me. I sent you the correct one, what I said.
Oh,
Comments, yeah.
Oh, I see. Wait, no. So copy the line.
Also, like mRuby that I mentioned earlier, it's more of a Lua-like, but Ruby. Like, it doesn't really have anything out of the box. It's meant for embedded stuff, like embedding the language into other runtimes.
Yeah. All right. So with Ruby Lua, I'm going to make so how I think this might work pretty well is I'm going to create a project board for this very issue, the issue about maybe picking a separate language for Nixpkgs. And in that project board, we can then add, I think it would be great to add all the relevant issues from Nixpkgs, any PRs that tried something similar in the past, like the RFC for oil shell, I think, would also be relevant. Of course, oil shell might be a very good alternative for backwards compatibility. Yeah, I guess with the does it sound good? Where we use the project board to kind of track these things, and I'd encourage everybody to look into their kind of favorite language or the language they think would be a good fit, and kind of go over it, maybe try some experiments, see if it could work well for Nixpkgs, and then write that down in some issue. So we can really have a better overview, hopefully for next time, but also just during our chats on Matrix or Discourse. So we have 3 minutes left. Is there something anybody else wants to kind of go into for a couple minutes?
Just one little addition. If anyone will be searching for languages, there is this website, awesome links and stuff for WASM, basically. So, like, if we can bootstrap one of those, that would be actually great.
My concern with WASM is that it's not as portable.
Yeah, I'm not sure. That might be the case. To be fair, there are like
Yeah.
WASM interpreters. At some point, it should be pretty portable, but yeah.
FYI, mruby requires Ruby to build.
Oh, really?
But the it uses Rake apparently. The primary Ruby implementation is pretty portable from my understanding. So it might still be an option though.
All right, yeah.
Two things I'm surprised nobody has brought up. One is probably off topic, but Python?
No,
right?
indentation
I
and
mean, I have
it's
my own
dainty
opinions
bootstrap.
about it.
Yeah, it's
I
like
have my own opinions. The other one is, I mean, the obvious thing to do here, given infinite time and all that stuff, is embedding something like Lua in Nix itself.
Embedding Lua in Nix itself. So like have a Nix DSL for writing Lua, or no?
For writing package build instructions and have Nix itself take care of it. Yeah.
So have like a
I guess it's going to avoid a fork.
Lua.
That is, as I said, infinite time. It's not going to happen. I'm surprised nobody has a
anything about it. As much as I want to be opinionated for Nix packages, I'm skeptical of being that opinionated, like for all of Nix. I feel like we should be able to write packages in other languages if we want, even if most of Nix packages is running in Lua or Python or Ruby or whatever.
It is like that it needs to consume a JSON definition of what needs to actually happen. We can, in theory, do whatever we want. So spit out JSON.
Yeah, Yuri?
I actually considered why not embed Lua or embed WASM into Nix itself. And the problem there is if we embed anything into Nix, once again, we need Nix to know how to do everything that is needed, that can be needed by the builder, which includes like supporting all the systems, supporting all the possible actions on those systems, providing essentially huge standard library. Because everything that you embed, you have to provide all the layers around it.
Yeah. Also, I think if you embed Nix or Lua into Nix, the assumption is that you're using like the same processor or something. But then how does parallel building and stuff work? Unless I guess we're just forking off the execs itself. So we're going to fork a new Nix process just to run Lua. Like
we already forked it to do exec. So
actually, I'm not sure if any of you are aware, but like bare minimal nude derivation has shell by default. It's used as like ash or something. It's actually embedded into Nix.
Well, right. I mean, it's kind of something was said about picking different languages, which is possible. And I think I think I saw some Haskell language builder used at some point. But right, the default is Bash right now, and we can pick a separate default, but it is going to be default, and probably most people should use that just for interoperability and composability of everything that we write. Right, it's kind of the language of specifying builder utilities in Nix packages.
Also, if we were to postpone this whole issue by a couple of years, we probably could get something like new shell into it, because GCC is supposedly gaining Rust support.
Yeah, that's a interesting idea. Well, I guess if we think of the kind of shell utilities currently written in Bash as the API, then we could also kind of change that. We could say that if utilities are written in any language, but they're compiled to a C-compatible API library, and then you can call that, and we just allow a better interface to that from any language then. And that might be a possibility. And then WASM could be in play also again.
By the way, one point about WASM that I wanted to forgot to outline here is that it allows us to run the same code to abstract the base system and to run the same code on any system, which means like it will allow us to create more system agnostic derivations essentially. Unless you actually depend on running something like actually running some like compiler and stuff, you could still get away with just running within WASM on any system, and such derivations will be more portable and everything.
Yeah,
Well,
I think it's
you get the same sort of thing with like Lua if you use the POSIX libraries. Oh, I guess if you're not running on a POSIX system,